The auction block smelled of pine resin and something older, iron, and fear. Mira had learned not to look at the crowd. She had learned this the same way she had learned everything, by surviving the lesson the first time. So she kept her eyes on the warped wooden slats beneath her feet and counted the splinters. 12. 13. 14. They had dressed her in undyed linen. Everyone else on the block wore pack colors. She wore nothing that claimed her, because nothing did. Wolfless. The word moved through the crowd the way smoke moves, low, quiet, unstoppable. She heard it the way she always heard it. Like a door closing. What no one in that crowd knew, what she did not yet know herself, was that the Lycan King had arrived 20 minutes before the auction began. He had stood in the shadows at the eastern arch, refusing every seat offered to him, watching. His guards had not understood why he would not leave. His generals had not understood why his jaw had tightened when the auctioneer's hand swept toward the girl in undyed linen. His wolf understood. It had gone very, very still. And when the bidding opened and the crowd's voices rose, bright and careless and cruel, Mira closed her eyes, pressed her thumb against the small river stone in her palm, and made herself breathe. She did not know his name yet. She would whisper it before the night was over. And when she did, every torch in the great hall would go dark, and then blaze back, gold, all at once. But that comes later. This is the part where they auction her off. Chapter 1. The auctioneer's voice was a blade dressed in velvet. Lot 7. Female. 22 years of age. Wolfless, yes, you heard correctly, wolfless, which as you all know disqualifies her from pack bonding, rank assignment, and ceremonial participation. He paused, letting the crowd absorb it like a verdict. She is, however, strong-backed, obedient, and unclaimed. Opening bid, 40 silver marks. 40 silver marks. The price of a good horse. Mira did not flinch. She had practiced not flinching the way other girls practice dancing, daily, deliberately, until it lived in the body and cost nothing. She was the 7th lot of the evening. She had watched 6 others before her walk off the block with someone's hand at their elbow, someone's colors newly draped across their shoulders. Each one claimed. Each one folded into a life, however small. She pressed her thumb against the river stone in her palm. It was smooth from years of handling, cool even in a warm room, reliable in the way almost nothing else had ever been reliable. She had found it at 7 years old in the shallows behind the pack house, the morning after her wolf failed to emerge for the first time. She had kept it as proof of something she could not yet name. She kept it still. 40 silver. Do I hear 50? Silence moved through the crowd like a held breath. Then a voice, bored, somewhere to the left, offered 45. The auctioneer smiled the smile of a man accustomed to these silences. Wolfless girls did not inspire bidding wars. They inspired hesitation. A wolfless female was a thing without a place in the natural order, useful, perhaps, in a limited domestic sense, but not bondable, not rankable, not real in the way that mattered to anyone assembled in this hall tonight. Mira knew this. She had known it since she was 7 years old, standing in the shallows, waiting for something that never came. She straightened her spine. Lowest creatures did not get to refuse. But they were not required to collapse, either. She had decided this a long time ago, alone, with a river stone in her hand and no one watching. She was still deciding it now. In the eastern arch, something shifted in the shadows. She did not see it. Chapter 2. The silence came first. Not the polite quiet of an auction pausing between bids. Something different, the kind of silence that falls when a room full of predators suddenly remembers what it is to be prey. Conversation stopped mid-syllable. The auctioneer's hand froze above his podium. Even the torches seemed to hold still. Mira looked up. He was already looking at her. She did not know his face. She had never been permitted inside the kind of rooms where his face was known. But she understood, in the wordless way the body understands danger, that the man moving through the parting crowd was not a man who attended auctions. He was the reason auctions stopped. Tall. Dark-coated. A scar that ran from his left jaw to the corner of his mouth, not ragged, but precise, the kind left by something that had meant to mark him and had only partially succeeded. His eyes, when the torchlight caught them, were the color of deep amber. Not warm. Not cold. Something older than either. His guards flanked him at a distance that suggested they knew better than to crowd him. He stopped at the foot of the auction block. The auctioneer found his voice first, barely. Your Majesty, we are honored. If you would allow us to prepare a seat. Who placed her here? Not a question. A stone dropped into still water. The auctioneer blinked. The lot was submitted by the Ashvale Pack Council, as is standard procedure for unclaimed. Who authorized the price? Another silence. Longer. Mira watched him the way she had learned to watch powerful men, carefully, from behind stillness, giving nothing away. He had not looked at the auctioneer once. He had not looked at the crowd, or the guards, or the banners bearing pack insignia along the upper walls. He was looking at her. Just her. His head tilted, barely a degree, as though he were hearing something no one else could hear. Beneath his coat, something shifted in his chest. A sound moved through him, low and involuntary, too deep to be a word. His general leaned close and murmured something urgent. The Lycan King did not respond. Instead, he reached into his coat, withdrew a single document bearing a black wax seal, and set it on the podium without looking down. She's mine, he said quietly. We're leaving. Chapter 3. They did not make it to the doors. This is irregular. The voice came from the upper gallery, measured, practiced, the voice of a man who had spent decades making irregularity sound like treason. Lord Casvan of the Ashvale Pack Council descended the gallery stairs with the unhurried confidence of someone who believed the room was still his. He was heavy-set, silver-haired, draped in Pack Council blue. 3 other council members followed at his heels like punctuation. The lot was submitted under standard unclaimed protocol, Casvan said, stopping at the base of the stairs. His eyes moved to Mira with the flat assessment of a man looking at furniture. Council procedure requires a minimum of 3 bids before private acquisition. 1 statement of claim does not constitute a completed transaction. He smiled. Even from a king. The room held its breath. Mira felt it, the old machinery of the world reassembling itself around her. The rules that had always applied to her and never to anyone else. She recognized the architecture of this moment. She had lived inside it her entire life. She pressed her thumb against the riverstone. The Lycan King had not moved. Furthermore, Casvan continued, drawing a folded document from his inner pocket. The Ashvale Council holds a standing welfare clause over all wolfless individuals processed through this hall. Any acquisition must be reviewed for suitability of placement. He let the pause sit. A wolfless female in a Lycan court. You'll understand our concern for her welfare. The word welfare landed the way he intended, soft enough to sound reasonable, sharp enough to draw blood. Mira watched the Lycan King's jaw tighten. When he spoke, his voice had not changed volume. It had changed texture. Under the Founding Accords, Article 9, Clause 4, he said, a fated bond supersedes all secondary council jurisdiction. Without exception. He turned to face Casvan fully for the first time. She is my fated mate. That determination is not subject to your welfare clause, your bidding procedure, or your comfort. He reached back without looking and his hand closed, steady, certain, around Mira's. She felt something move through her palm at the contact. Not warmth exactly. Something older. Like a door she had never known existed swinging open in her chest. Anyone who obstructs us, the Lycan King said quietly, will explain themselves to the Founding Council by morning. Casvan's smile did not disappear. But something behind it did. Chapter 4. The healer's name was Solvane, and she did not knock. She entered the antechamber of the Lycan King's quarters the way old women with real authority always entered rooms, without apology, without announcement, carrying a worn leather satchel that smelled of yarrow and cedar and something Mira couldn't name. She was small and white-haired and her eyes were the particular shade of gray that belongs to people who have seen too much to be surprised by anything. She looked at Mira the way no one had ever looked at her. Not at her status. Not at her absence. At something underneath both. "Sit," Sylvain said. Not unkindly. Mira sat. The healer circled her once, slowly, without touching. Then she stopped. Set down her satchel. Pressed 2 fingers to the inside of Mira's wrist and closed her eyes. The room went very quiet. When Sylvain opened her eyes, she looked at the Lycan King standing by the window. "I thought so," she said. The moment she was brought through the gates. She turned back to Mira. "You were never wolfless, child." Mira's breath stopped. "What you carry is a Lunaris verata." Sylvain said the words carefully, the way you say something that deserves the weight of its own syllables. "It is a soul-bound wolf, dormant, not absent. Sealed at birth, not by defect but by design, to protect a power too large for an unprotected child to survive." The Lycan King had gone very still by the window. "We believe the Lunaris verata extinct," Sylvain continued. "The last confirmed case was 4 generations before your grandmother's time. The old texts called them the wolves that wait, because they do not emerge until the soul finds its anchor." She paused. "Its fated anchor." She looked briefly at the king. "It's why the wolves in the eastern stable went quiet when she passed them this evening," Sylvain said. "It's why the torches surged when she spoke his name in the hall." She returned to Mira, her gray eyes steady and without drama. "You were not broken. You were protected. There is a considerable difference." Mira looked down at her hand, the hand he had held. Her palm was warm. It had not stopped being warm since the moment he touched her. Outside the window, every wolf in the Lycan King's court lifted its head and began, softly, to howl. Chapter 5. He brought her tea he had made himself. Mira did not know what to do with this information. She sat in the chair by the fire in the antechamber, Sylvain long gone, the revelation still settling into her bones like heat after a long cold, and the Lycan King, whose name, she had learned, was Aldrich, set a clay cup on the small table beside her without ceremony and lowered himself into the opposite chair as though this were something he had done before. As though she were someone he had done this for before. "You don't have to stay on the edge of it," he said. She looked up. The chair. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. "You're sitting like you're prepared to stand up quickly." She was. She had been sitting that way her entire life. She did not move immediately. Then, slowly, she let her spine find the back of the chair. Something in his expression shifted, quiet, private, gone before she could name it. They sat in the fire's warmth for a while without speaking. It was the most companionable silence Mira had ever inhabited. She was not accustomed to silence that asked nothing of her. "Does it frighten you?" she said finally, what Sylvain said. He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "No. It frightens me. I know." He looked at her steadily. "You spent 22 years being told the absence was the truth of you. Being told otherwise doesn't erase 22 years in an evening." She looked at the fire. "What does erase it?" "Time," he said. "And someone who doesn't look away." The mate bond moved between them, warm, present, unhurried. She felt it the way you feel sunlight through a window, indirectly, completely. She was still holding the riverstone. He noticed. He did not ask about it. She found, unexpectedly, that she wanted to tell him anyway. "I found it the morning my wolf didn't come," she said. "I've carried it since." He was quiet for a moment. Then, what did it feel like? That morning. Like being the only person in a room full of people who could hear music. He looked at her for a long time. Then a knock came at the door. Sharp. Urgent. His general's voice, low and taut, from the other side. Your Majesty. The Ashvale Council has called an emergency session. Lord Casvan is petitioning the Founding Council to nullify the bond. Chapter 6. She heard it by accident. That was the thing about stone corridors and half-open doors. They did not discriminate between conversations meant to be private and ears that were never meant to listen. Mira had only stepped out to find water. She had only paused because she recognized Aldrich's voice. She did not move when she heard what followed. If Casvan presents the nullification petition with council signatures, the Founding Council will be obligated to hear it. The general's voice, low, procedural, the voice of a man delivering a problem he had already half-solved. A contested bond hearing takes 30 days minimum. During that period, she cannot remain inside Lycan territory without providing grounds for accusations of coercion. A pause. She has to leave. Aldrich's voice. Flat. Controlled in the way that things are controlled when the alternative is destruction. Voluntarily and visibly. Before morning, ideally. It cannot appear forced. If it appears forced, Casvan uses it. It must appear to be her choice. Another pause. Longer. Then make the arrangements. Mira stepped back from the door. She did not wait to hear the rest. She had heard enough. She had heard the shape of it, the familiar geometry of a door closing, and she knew this architecture better than any other. She had lived inside it her entire life. The moment when something almost became real, and then didn't. She returned to the antechamber. Dressed without lighting a candle. Folded nothing because she had arrived with nothing. She set the river stone on the table beside the untouched tea. She did not know why. Only that carrying it any further felt like carrying something that belonged to a hope she did not have the right to keep. She was at the eastern gate when a hand closed gently around her arm. Not Aldrich. A woman, elderly, unhurried, wrapped in a gray traveling cloak. She had the same steady eyes as someone who had delivered too much news to panic about any of it. Branna. One of the elder wolves. She pressed something warm into Mira's palm without explanation. A letter. Sealed in black wax. Aldrich's seal. He wrote it an hour ago, Branna said quietly. Before the general arrived. He intended to give it to you himself. She paused. He does not know you are leaving. Mira looked at the seal. The cold outside was sharp and complete. She did not open the letter. Not yet. She pressed it against her chest and walked into the dark. Chapter 8. 3 months later, the eastern window of the Lycan King's quarters faced a mountain range that turned pink at dawn. Mira had learned this by accident, the same way she had learned most good things. By waking earlier than intended and finding the light already there, waiting, as though it had been doing this long before she arrived and would continue long after, patient and indifferent and beautiful. She watched it now with both hands wrapped around a clay cup. The same kind he had used that first evening. She had kept it. It seemed important to keep the ordinary things. Behind her, Aldrich was still asleep, which was, she had discovered, its own kind of revelation. The Lycan King who made entire rooms go silent with his stillness slept with one arm thrown across his face like a man defending himself from mourning. She had not told him she found this unreasonably tender. She intended to keep that to herself for a while longer. The riverstone sat on the windowsill. She had retrieved it from the antechamber table the morning after the Founding Council ruling, quietly, without ceremony, slipping it into her pocket while Branna pretended not to notice. She no longer carried it. She no longer needed to carry it. But she kept it where the morning light could find it, because some things deserved to be seen rather than held onto. There was a letter on the writing desk that had arrived yesterday from the Ashvale territory. She recognized the handwriting, her sister Calla's, cramped and careful and nothing like her voice. I was wrong about what you were. I think I always knew. I don't ask for anything. I only wanted you to know that I knew. Mira had read it once. She had not yet decided what to do with it. She thought she might write back. Not today. But eventually, because she could afford generosity now, and because carrying old bitterness required energy she had better uses for. The mountain range finished turning pink and began turning gold. She heard Aldrich shift behind her. Then his voice, rough with sleep, "You're watching the mountains again. They do something different every morning." A pause. The sound of him sitting up. "Come back to bed." In a moment. She watched the gold deepen. Felt the mate bond warm and steady in her chest, not the desperate clinging thing she had feared love might be, but something more like the river stone. Cool and reliable and completely, permanently hers. She was not what they had said she was. She never had been. Not a lot number. Not a wolfless thing. Not a door that opened onto nothing. Herself. Luminous. Anchored. And finally, completely enough. Chapter 8. 3 months later, the eastern window of the Lycan King's quarters faced a mountain range that turned pink at dawn. Mira had learned this by accident, the same way she had learned most good things, by waking earlier than intended and finding the light already there, waiting, as though it had been doing this long before she arrived and would continue long after, patient and indifferent and beautiful. She watched it now with both hands wrapped around a clay cup. The same kind he had used that first evening. She had kept it. It seemed important to keep the ordinary things. Behind her, Aldrich was still asleep, which was, she had discovered, its own kind of revelation. The Lycan King who made entire rooms go silent with his stillness slept with one arm thrown across his face like a man defending himself from morning. She had not told him she found this unreasonably tender. She intended to keep that to herself for a while longer. The riverstone sat on the windowsill. She had retrieved it from the antechamber table the morning after the founding council ruling, quietly, without ceremony, slipping it into her pocket while Branna pretended not to notice. She no longer carried it. She no longer needed to carry it. But she kept it where the morning light could find it, because some things deserved to be seen rather than held onto. There was a letter on the writing desk that had arrived yesterday from the Ashvale territory. She recognized the handwriting, her sister Calla's, cramped and careful and nothing like her voice. "I was wrong about what you were. I think I always knew. I don't ask for anything. I only wanted you to know that I knew." Mira had read it once. She had not yet decided what to do with it. She thought she might write back. Not today. But eventually, because she could afford generosity now, and because carrying old bitterness required energy she had better uses for. The mountain range finished turning pink and began turning gold. She heard Aldrich shift behind her. Then his voice, rough with sleep, "You're watching the mountains again. They do something different every morning." A pause. The sound of him sitting up. "Come back to bed." In a moment. She watched the gold deepen. Felt the mate bond warm and steady in her chest, not the desperate clinging thing she had feared love might be, but something more like the river stone. Cool and reliable and completely, permanently hers. She was not what they had said she was. She never had been. Not a lot number. Not a wolfless thing. Not a door that opened onto nothing. Herself. Luminous. Anchored. And finally, completely enough.